The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame.
Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I'm Raygan Kelly, and I'm joined this week by the triumphant return of co-host Laura.
Yes, hello. I'm very glad to be back. Various life events conspired against me. I'm glad to be back talking about short video games.
Yeah, and this one is a very, very short video game, and really charming. And we just finished playing it, like practically literally just a few hours ago. We're talking this week about Duck Detective. What's the subtitle again? The Salami something?
The Secret Salami.
The Secret Salami.
There is no secret salami in this game.
Yeah,
there are secrets about salami, but the salami itself, very prominently displayed. No secretive nature of the salami.
Yeah, they were going for the alliteration over the accuracy of the title, I guess, within the plot. But this is a weird one because, so first of all, this was something I saw. I think maybe might have been Ludo Narracon or last year or one of the big events, and they just had a trailer for it. And I was pretty excited because this appeared to be the convergence of two things that we absolutely love. One is the sort of loose, fun, narrative, detective fiction vibe of something like Frog Detective. I mean, you could be forgiven for thinking this was directly related to Frog Detective. It is not. Duck Detective is a distinct, totally separate thing from Frog Detective. Come on. But also, it has a lot of the same mechanical trappings of the sort of new genre of detective or investigation games kind of embodied by things like Golden Idol. And when I saw, oh, hey, another Golden Idol-ish type of game, Laura, I love playing those games with you. I was super excited to have a new one to play. And it's nice that it's so short that we could quite easily slip it into our schedule.
Yeah, if we hadn't been mostly playing late at night, we would have done this all in one sitting. However, the calendar and children disobeying bedtime meant that we did this over 2 nights. I think this is easily a one-session game, especially if you are not talking to every single person about everything, which is the way we like to play deduction games here at the Short Game, because we'll listen to all of your dialogue games and listen to it. I mean, this game has full voiceover, which is a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, I did not expect this game to have full voiceover. And I honestly, looking at the Duck Detective and his little chubby beady doll eyes and flipper hands, I was not expecting him to have voice acting at all, because he just sort of has a vibe of well, this is a silent character. Look at him. He doesn't look like he talks, but he does. He talks, as do all of the other animal characters in this. So before we dive into anything related to the mechanics, and we probably need to compare and contrast the way this uses this sort of type of mystery solving with other games like it. But before we dive into anything mechanically, set up the story and world of Duck Detective.
Duck Detective is your classic down on your luck noir detective. The first thing you find out is this poor duck is going through a divorce. He doesn't have any money in his bank account. He keeps buying bread instead of paying his rent. Duck Detective is in a bad place. Classic noir stuff. And the voice is gravelly and puts so much extra sauce on every line reading. The world of Duck Detective, everyone is an animal, and this Duck Detective is desperate, quite frankly. Duck Detective's desperate when we start this game out. He
uses the very last of his money, his schmarks. We'll talk about the strange setting, I guess. But his last schmarks on bus fare to get to a client. The client is at Bear Bus, a bus firm This and the mystery they've asked him to solve is someone has been stealing lunches in the office. So about as low stakes as a mystery game can get. No murders have happened here yet. Somebody had their lunch stolen in the office, and they want to hire a private detective, apparently a famous private detective, in order to come in and find out who took their lunch.
I mean, Duck Detective is down on his luck. The lunch is all he can deal with. So you march into this office, try to get in, try to solve the case, and wouldn't you know it, it's more complicated. It's not just lunch. That's kind of the point of the game is there's a MacGuffin about the stolen lunch. You have a lot of other mysteries to solve, like a golden idol or an Obra Dinn, as you go around talking to folks, filling in blanks. And it's a office mostly. Like there's nothing fancy about the office.
Almost entirely in a single building. Mm-hmm. And it's got an interesting kind of vibe. Like one of the things that they reference in the marketing for this game is like, Golden Idol meets Agretsuko, which I think is actually pretty spot on because something about the office setting really lends itself to that. Obviously, the animal characters, even some of the characters, like I think what was her name, Laura, the sort of cat creature, the overworked customer service person.
We won't say last names because those are puzzles.
Yes, that's a good point. Learning people's names is part of the mystery. But it's she even sort of has a vibe that many of the characters have almost direct analogs on Agretsuko. So if you've seen that show or anime, which is on Netflix, actually way better than you might expect. I really like that show a lot. Then you'll probably be right at home here. But it's not really lifting anything wholesale. I don't think there's anything wrong with, making another thing about an office full of overworked animals who are irritated with each other. And the characters are fun. Duck Detective himself, very fun. But some of the other characters that you encounter, I particularly liked. Suddenly I'm misremembering her name. The giraffe girl
Sophie.
Who's like Sophie, who's a K-pop fan and works in reception. I really liked her. All the characters were pretty fun, and art style wise, it's doing something that I thought was kind of cool. It has a 3D world, like you're looking in a sort of isometric perspective down on these office environments and other rooms and spaces, and it is 3D, complete with like physics
like
when you.
A top-down tilted, for those who don't know, isometric. But it's 3D, but the characters are 2D cutouts.
Exactly. It reminded me a lot of Paper Mario or other games like that, because the characters they're not just little 2D sprites. They have that white outline that looks sort of like a sticker or like a stamped thing. It's very cute looking. And characters have very little in the way of animation. Walk cycle is the little sticker bounces. So very cute style. And I was immediately drawn to it. Partly that's why we played this game, right? Like I thought it looked cute and I wanted to play one of these. And it just immediately sort of drew me in.
And I was very happy the first time we knocked over a trash can because that little 2D sprite will bump into stuff all the time.
Speaking of which, this didn't happen to me, but I gather that there are a lot of possibility for that little 2D sprite to get stuck on the level geometry, because along with things like options and exit, in the main menu of the game is an option called unstuck, where it will teleport your character sprite to the beginning of the room again, to protect, I assume, get you unstuck from behind a desk or wherever you managed to get yourself stuck. Didn't actually happen to me, but I thought it was very funny that was there.
Yeah. We initially thought it was a hint because we wanted to check out the hint system. That is not the hints. Hints are just hitting H or the question mark, like a classic place. But if you're trying to do unstuck for hint system, you're just going to teleport to the beginning of the room and be a little confused.
Yeah, I did think unstuck was an odd word to use for a hint system, but I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I wonder what they're doing there. The unstuck system, what does that mean? And I hit it finally when we were in the middle of a really difficult problem. And it's like, oh, it just moved me 4 feet to the left. Okay.
Yeah.
Another thing that's really strange about this game is its setting. It's from a German developer, in Berlin. Happy Broccoli Games, by the way. And so on its face, I wasn't expecting this game to be so deeply embedded in a certain angle of German culture. But this is a game that takes place both in the modern day and in a fantasy version of what's the right term for, Cold War era?
It still includes East and West Berlin.
Yes,
It never
exactly.
says it's set in Berlin, but they do talk about East and West, and folks have
and there are
just a
checkpoints.
little bit of a German accent underneath their Valley Girl or Noir
That was very
aspects.
funny to me. Yeah. The German, the specifically Berlin, kind of Cold War era Berlin angle kind of pokes its head in here periodically. Things like border checkpoints between East and West are an important plot point, and you're buying things with schmarks. There's other little ways that crops up as well.
But there's still internet, so
Yeah, people have cell phones. Like it's a very strange mishmash. Animals, Cold War, Twitter, strange stuff is like mixed in here.
Oh, Blue Sky, actually.
Oh, excuse me, right? Yeah, the
Correction.
characters are not on Twitter; they're on Blue Sky, which I thought was very strangely of the moment. But you can follow Duck Detective on Blue Sky. I think he's just duckdetective.bsky.com or whatever the
URL is for
the
Blue
URL
Sky.
is for those. Yeah, very strange, but I thought that was pretty great. So how much can we talk about the mechanics of the game without getting into spoilers? I think we could talk about how this works pretty much.
Yeah, so unlike Golden Idol and Obra Dinn, this has a lot more point-and-click adventure game DNA, in which you're walking around a room, talking to characters, showing them things, and it does maintain the get words you can place in blanks mechanic, but it derives those words from conversations you have, and someone will just be like, I'm lonely, and then the word lonely will be one word you can put in a blank. So you are not in Golden Idol, you were looking at objects or paintings and things and collecting the words. This one, it's all coming almost entirely coming from dialogue or from you investigating objects with your little magnifying glass, which I would like to go into detail
that's
about
probably my favorite
investigating
mechanic
people,
in the
because that's
game,
the mechanic that was
glass.
super specific to this game.
Yeah. Before we do talk about that, though, just comparing this to something like Golden Idol, this is absolutely the easiest one of these I have played. And so if this is a genre that has daunted you in the past, this is the easiest one of those. If that's a negative, too bad. But it is like a 2-hour experience that's meant to be something that somebody who isn't familiar, who hasn't solved the mystery of the Obra Dinn can jump into. So this is a really easy one of these. But it still had some fun puzzles, especially towards the end when we were, trying to piece together some of the details.
And it's clean. I just want to say this is a clean game. It is not. There are no cuss words. There's no sexual content. There's no murder. The word murder appears, but there's no murder. I just want to say, in case people are trying to think if this is safe for kids, the jokes will go over their heads, but there's nothing dirty.
Not all
in
of
this
them.
game.
There's a lot of jokes in this that would be perfectly fine for young kids.
Correct.
And they might enjoy quite a bit. It's a game about stolen salami. That's the kind of stuff that kids think is funny.
There's crime, but it's not gruesome or sexual in any way. So just wanted to shout that out, because that is different from Golden Idol, which is, about cults. So
Yeah. If I had any sort of negative to say about this angle of the game, the sort of the word puzzle, piecing together words and clues angle, some of it did feel a little more arbitrary to me than it has in other games like Golden Idol or maybe The Root Trees Are Dead, because some of it does just sort of require you to sort of imagine scenarios that would fit and see if the words are there for it. It's not quite as So with some of the puzzles in Golden Idol, we could have diagrammed out our deductions very clearly, because they were clear, very difficult, sometimes tricky little, intricate things, but they were very specific, and that was part of the sort of puzzle box nature of that game. This game felt less like that. You get to know these characters, and you get to learn a lot of details about them, and then collect all of these different words from your dialogue. But then ultimately, you're mostly kind of relying on your intuition and your knowledge of the characters, and the fairly small amount of clues that you actually discover to put together these scenarios. And then, like those other games, once you do, it'll give you a page in your notebook that has like a bunch of blanks, that says blank showed blank blank, then blank did blank, right? And you have to think, well, what could potentially all of this be? But you're not doing quite as much, I think, like puzzly deduction. It's more sort of about intuition and sort of getting to know the characters. But it is still doing that thing where it tells you how many of the blanks you filled in are wrong in a sort of vague general way. So like more than 3 of these are incorrect, or 2 or fewer are incorrect. So you never know exactly like what do I have right and what do I have wrong in this until you finally lock in those correct guesses and it turns green or whatever.
Yeah, and I will say intuitive's a really good word for it. There were times where I just kind of looked at the scene and not at specific evidence and went, I bet this is the case, and filled it out. Mm-hmm. I think the game wanted me to do that. Earlier in the game, it was so based on specific pieces of evidence that I thought that everything was going to be in a piece of evidence or a scene. But that is not the case. Just know sometimes your gut is going to just give you the answer. If there were specific evidence-based or dialogue-based answers to every puzzle, I didn't see it. But your gut is, like, it's going to lead you in the right direction. The game is not too complicated. It's okay to have some puzzles that are like, I see this, this probably happened. Those guesses are encouraged in this game.
Yeah, and while there are some red herrings, the game is not trying to like deliberately mislead you exactly. It's kind of trying to lead you through the story. And so, if you think you know what's happening, you should at the very least try to fill that in and see if it, dings. And very often it will. And that's kind of part of the fun of it, is it did have a lot of forward motion to it. It felt like, we're moving through the story. It didn't feel like you're, having to stop to create an Excel spreadsheet or something to figure out the Salami mystery.
There is a case where a character was in a certain location and we were joking about why that was the case. And that actually ended up being part of that intuitive puzzle piece of, it's one of the many things leading you to believe X is true.
Yeah, I bet so-and-so did such and such because that would be funny or would fit with the other details. And that was it. Yeah. So, but it's apart from that mechanic, which is the main sort of way that this intersects with those other games we were talking about, things like Root Trees and Golden Idol and so on.
Much, much, much easier.
Much easier. But this does have a couple of other little things that I thought were pretty great. Tell me about the mechanic with the magnifying glass.
Yes. So this was one of my favorite things about the game, which is you can at times investigate things further by clicking on them with a magnifying glass and zooming in on details. This is most fun when you meet a new character and you can zoom in on them. And they've actually, when you see a full character portrait, it's at the sticker you see walking around resolution. But when you zoom in, they've drawn a second version of it with more details. So you zoom in on a hand and you see fingernails, or you zoom in on an eyeball that looks normal and you see an eyelid and some bloodshot eyes. So they've drawn full detailed second versions of every character that you can only reveal in small increments with your magnifying glass. These are amazing and also disturbing at times, and it's great. This is my favorite thing about the game.
It's kind of like if you walked up to a Sanrio character and you pull out your magnifying glass and it's a Ren and Stimpy close-up underneath.
100%.
And that's partly that's partly just like for fun. Like there's this idea of like, well, okay, you know, I'm seeing the game through the cutesy filter, but like really these are, you know, gross bodies. But also it's great for finding clues because, you know, you don't see the stain on someone's shirt or, you know, the name tag hidden under their lapel when you're looking at a cutesy sticker of them that's hopping around the 3D space. But, you know, you get that chance to like look closer. And it uses that same mechanic in a bunch of places, not just looking at characters, although that is probably the funniest. You also use that to like examine people's computer screens and documents and other clues that you find. And as you do that, you're kind of revealing these little details in them. And, you know, it's more fun than just getting a new JPEG or whatever. Like you get to like examine something and like look around and hunt through it. And as you do that, especially with the clues, it will highlight certain elements that then turn into new words that you can use in the larger sort of, you know, piecing things together puzzle in your notebook. But yeah, I was a really big fan of the magnifying glass mechanic here. You also have a notebook in the same kind of way that you have in a lot of these other games that will keep track of the details that you've learned. I didn't think it was as vital because, like I said, like there's just less to keep track of. But it does do things like keep track of the characters and their names as you learn them. It'll keep track of all of the clues that you've seen, and you can go back and look at those clues without needing to go back to wherever they are in the world.
Yeah, and you fill this in. It's not like in the Root Trees Are Dead where you can type whatever you like. This is where you know, character portrait, you drop in the names. The clues are added automatically, but it's not like an open type thing. We did not use pen and paper. We played together. We did not need to.
Yeah.
It's not that kind of game.
It was a breezy, basically 2 hours, I would guess. And a fun one. And this would be, I think, a really fun game to play with a friend on the couch. You know, playing it together with Laura was great. It kept me, you know, moving forward, and you know, we kept each other from getting stuck. And I also think this would be a great game to play with a kid. If you have a kid who's interested in, you know, who has the sort of patience to sit with you for a game like this. This is about 2 hours, which would be great for 1 or 2 sittings with a kid. And has great cartoonish characters. It's fully voiced, so the kid doesn't have to read. Most of it's visual. Like, this is a game that I think a very young kid would probably have a little bit of a hard time playing, but it's fully designed around a controller. Like, you can play this with a mouse and keyboard, but like it's clear that they optimized this for controller first. And absolutely, I think, like a perfect introduction to deduction games as a genre that is super kid friendly.
I don't think the crimes are ones the kids would be familiar with, but I think it's okay.
Yeah. I feel like maybe this is a bit of a misjudgment based on the fact that these are developers from Berlin. I'm sure that if you are a 7-year-old in Berlin, you know things about the checkpoints between East and West Berlin that I have never learned. There are elements there specifically that just
I don't think it's confusing. It's just, you know, the crimes you hear about in a kid's cartoon is usually beating up and murder. And these are a little bit more esoteric crimes. But there's still salamis. There's still animals. So I don't think it's obscure. You just might have to explain a little bit.
Yeah, kids understand, like, you know, someone stole the lunch, or someone's, or even kids can probably even understand somebody's, you know, embezzling or something like that. Like, you know, given the right setup. But there are angles in this that you might have to explain to them a little bit about post-war Cold War Germany. That might just
be like, they did a bad thing with a bus. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. We're talking around the details of one of the major mysteries. It's a short game, so anything else to say about Duck Detective? This was a super short one, so I'm not sure what else there is to say about it.
The only thing, and this is a minor spoiler, but I think it's an interesting enough point that I want to bring it up. At the end of the game, you choose who you want to arrest.
That was very strange.
You are presented with various people involved with the major crime. There are also secondary crimes that you don't worry about in this, but you choose if you're going to arrest these people or not. And at the end of the game, they give you the statistics on who on how that shook out, like what percentage of players chose to arrest or not arrest each character. I just found that to be such a strange way to end the game. I was thrilled by it because it was weird, and Raygan and I got to debate whether or not we wanted to arrest different people. But I just think that's such a wild end.
The various animals have. It's strange.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's strange about that to me is like I've played other games obviously that do the like, you know, at the end of the game you make some choice and then you get to see the stats on what other players chose. But what is sort of strange here is that it's not the case that you can end this game with a, you know, different idea of who is responsible or culpable for the crimes than other players. Like I think everybody ending the game gets essentially the same ending in that like you'll discover the same solution to the case as every other player.
Yes.
So it isn't something where it's like tracking, well, like, oh, you know, how many people thought it was this person versus that person. You're literally just deciding, well, was this person involved enough to go to jail?
Yeah.
How much did you like this person?
Do you believe in accomplices?
How directly do you have to be involved in a crime? What is true justice
who I was
here?
like, wait, why can't I arrest these other people for doing a different crime?
I know there were other crimes that we didn't even address. It was very strange, but yeah, I kind of liked that it did that, and I did think it was fun to see, you know, what the I thought it was fun to make my own choices there and to debate them with you, and then to see what other people chose. But it just struck me as very odd because it wasn't the sort of
it was a total shift to be like, and now you're a cop,
and now you have to decide who goes to spend, you know, 5 to 10 in what's probably not a very nice jail based on the setting they're living in.
I read so much Golden Age detective fiction, and the detective solves the puzzle and then the police figure out the crime, like who to charge. And so I kind of assumed we were in that world. So when Duck Detective moves into arrest mode, it was a little surprising to me. I just thought it was notable.
Yeah, who gave him the right to arrest people? Like, he clearly quit the police force. You see his Polizzi badge that he's keeping as a memento in his squalid apartment at the beginning. He even comments on it. So I don't know why he has the right to decide, but I guess whatever.
The only other thing I wanted to bring up, and this is just a minor peeve, is there were threads that didn't solve to my solution.
Yeah.
Like there's a person outside complaining about their bus. We kind of thought that would enter into the plot at some point. The fact that the buses are late does enter into the plot, but we kind of thought this person was going to do something later, and they didn't. So
Yeah,
I think
red
there's some
herring.
open threads like that in this game that I'd like closed. But that's a pretty minor gripe for something like this.
Yeah, having a red herring here and there is a good thing in a game like this. I think that's fine. I do think it was a little weird that seemed like an entire character that was a bit of a you know, open, you know, didn't amount to anything in the story, which seems a little weirder in a game like this where it has a very small cast. Like for a game like this, I think there are 6 characters in the office,
Something like that.
maybe 7.
Yeah, it's that the Duck Detective, but then there's someone outside you meet, and when it's the only other character, you think they're gonna come back.
Yeah, but they don't. Sorry for the spoiler on that one, but you know,
just
anyway.
a minor thing that.
So yeah, this game is available on Steam and also the Switch. I think it might be on other console platforms as well. I didn't actually check.
Xbox.
Oh, nice. Okay, on Xbox as well. And it is priced, I think, pretty appropriately for a game of this size. It is $9.99 on Steam, although if you look for it right now, it's 10% off during the launch window, $8.99. I think this is that's a good price for something that you're going to spend an evening or two with. And this is by a developer, Happy Broccoli Games, that also put out a game last year that I was pretty interested in playing and never got around to, called Kraken Academy. It was a little bit more of a sort of bigger game, sort of school life RPG about a time loop and something along those lines. Looked fun. I'm eager to see what these folks do with this. If this game's a success, I could see them doing more Duck Detective games. The Frog Detective people had a good success, I think, putting out multiple episodes. I prefer this to like this sort of little episodic thing works well for this sort of silly game where they can just, release a small short one of these. And if it hits with its audience, then they could continue and make other Duck Detective mysteries. And if not, no big deal. I enjoyed my time with Duck Detective: The Secret Salami.
And I will say, yes, I am familiar with the Gravity Falls TV show Duck Detective, which is a TV show within the TV show. And you will be thrilled to know that the phrase "quack the case" does show up in this game. But they don't have the punchline of Gravity Falls.
Well, a fair good number of duck puns were made here. So
oh yeah,
if you're seeking those.
The Gravity Falls joke is that Duck Detective said, "Well, Duck Detective, you really quacked the case," and he just says, "Don't patronize me."
That's so good. So since that was a nice short game and also a pretty short discussion, we've got some time for what's making us happy this week. Laura, what's making you happy this week?
Well, I got a chance to see the movie Ball of Fire this weekend at Paris Theater. It's a weird theater. Like, Netflix bought a single screen theater in New York, and normally it uses it to show like Hitman. Was all this weekend was like Richard Linklater came and talked about Hitman, a movie that premiered on Netflix, so that he can get some theater exposure. But Netflix doesn't always have a movie they want to put in the theater, so they use this as an excuse to curate series. They've done anniversary programming of 1974 movies, 1984 movies. We saw The Parallax View and A Passage to India there for this. But they're currently doing a lot of series where they're taking stuff from LA, like the Academy Branch Select series that they aired in LA. And they're just shipping all those movies up to New York and showing them. So this was the Academy Award Writers Branch picked this as the movie that epitomized like what they do. Ball of Fire is a screwball comedy that is weirdly based on Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, kind of. The theme is that there's 8 professors, so 7 weirdos and Gary Cooper, writing an encyclopedia. And the grammarian learns that he has he's been trying to learn slang from old books, and meets his garbage man, finds out that all of his slang is incorrect, and he throws up his arms. He's like, I've got to leave the house. I've got to go into the world and learn slang to write the encyclopedia article. So he heads out to a nightclub where he meets Barbara Stanwyck. She is a gangster moll, a girlfriend of a gangster who's about to get arrested. She needs to go into hiding, so she decides she's going to go just live with these professors in the encyclopedia house while she hides out.
That is a funny Snow White twist. Yeah. That really is funny. Okay.
So it's Barbara Stanwyck and all these men. Somehow they don't seem like perverts. They're definitely very into her, but like it all seems very innocent and cute. She's in a showgirl dress. She is mixing up their lives. She is teaching them slang. She is seducing Gary Cooper. And it is just so full of weird 40s slang words that are used to great comedic effect. There's a part where Gary Cooper's trying to diagram the difference between like corny and being a cornball and being like you called me corny. Like, please explain. Let's go into a huge diagram sentence of like why I'm lame on the board, where he's writing out all of the different words for lame and trying to explain like my cufflinks are this, but my voice is this. It's all very funny, very cute. It loses a little steam in the last act because it has to, quickly turn into a rom out of the com. But man, Billy Wilder wrote the script and Howard Hawks directed. And I'm very sad this is not available on Blu-ray anywhere, but you can get a DVD at like almost any public library. Criterion, release Ball of Fire. We deserve it.
I'll let them know.
I'll also say the specific thing that made me happy is it is 2024 and Barbara Stanwyck walks out and the audience gave her entrance applause.
Wow.
Like someone in the audience started it, and then like everyone was like, "Yes, Barbara Stanwyck in a really sexy dress. We're gonna applaud you for walking into the movie." It was mentioned in several Letterboxd, but I was just like, this audience is ready for this movie. You never get to see Screwballs on the big screen, and when you do, you should go because they're so much funnier in person.
That's really true. I've been making more use of our library's DVD selection recently, mostly because my kids are very enchanted. But I didn't even have a DVD player hooked up for many years. But my kids recently kind of got enchanted by the fact that like you can go get a movie and it's on a thing that you pick up and you take home with you.
Yeah.
It's in a box. How's the movie in the box? What is this disc for? And they were really enchanted by that. And so we started getting some DVDs from the library every time we go. And it's mostly, various cartoons, most of which they could easily also watch on streaming because we've, got a lot of other options. But they like the act of like getting a DVD and putting it into, in this case, my old PS3, because it's the only thing I had handy that has a DVD player. But that's been kind of fun. I will look out for, what was it, Balls of Fire?
A Ball of Fire.
Ball
singular.
of Fire. I will look out for that. That sounds like fun.
Yeah, it's just a very fun, silly movie. There's a part where an old lady says, like, she's the type of woman that can collapse a civilization. And I'm like,
Goals.
yes, she can. Wonderful. Perfect. No notes.
Awesome. I don't have quite of a good of a suggestion this week. Last week I talked a lot about how I've been kind of overthinking and reworking my entire like e-reading world. Bought a new e-reader. I actually have a second one coming because I decided that I didn't like that one and I'm exchanging. And all that. But I can actually recommend one specific book that I have read, or I'm in the process of reading. I haven't finished it yet, but I can easily recommend it already. This is at the risk of becoming a cliche. I have been doing a lot of thinking about the Roman Empire. And I love Rome stuff. I love books about Rome, but I actually haven't read that many like straight up history books about Rome. Like I've read a lot of like historical fiction set in Rome and watched a lot of, like the HBO show Rome and listen to the History of Rome podcast and stuff like that. But I never like sat down and read a book of history about Rome, apart from maybe textbooks in college. And so I decided that I would do that. And one of the most widely recommended books is SPQR, A History of Ancient Rome by Mary Beard. And so I think about halfway through it right now and really liking it. And I don't want to necessarily like go through anything point by point or whatever, but I like that she doesn't take a very like chronological approach to things. She starts with like a really interesting chapter that's kind of like, late Republican, story about Cicero, who's a character that's like super important in everything you read about Rome, but also not one of the Roman history, historical figures that I actually know all that much about, and starts with this like really interesting story that kind of explains him and his whole deal. And then kind of works backward and forward from there. So the structure of it is interesting. It's not just like a dry, like, and, this person begat this person kind of thing. But she also, it is really a work of history. She's talking about like, how do we know some of the things that we know, and why would something be important? The second or third chapter, I forget, that is about sort of the period when Rome was, we think, or the Romans thought, ruled by kings, but like all of the bizarre inconsistencies in the stories that we have there, and like the tiny scant information that we have like from the ground about the Roman kings. Like, what do we actually know about what really was a Roman king? Like, it's very implausible. Like, you think, okay, well, Roman kings, we know what a king is, but like, it's very implausible that a city that would have been the size of Rome would have even had a king in the way that we really think of it. What is a king when you're, a collection of mud huts on a hill next to the Tiber? It's a really interesting, well-written history book, if that's the kind of thing that you want. It's a bestseller, so obviously I'm not the first person to say. But if you want like an interesting, well-written, propulsive book of Roman history, I would really recommend it. And it's made me realize that I do a lot of audiobooks. I do less like reading of like nonfiction, or less reading of like print. That's part of what I'm trying to change by kind of getting back into, using an e-reader and doing more. And I'm realizing that like part of the reason that I have shifted, I've been doing, I've read so much fiction and so very little nonfiction, is I think that just audiobook nonfiction doesn't really work for me for one reason or another.
It's harder to follow.
It is.
To me.
Yeah. I can follow a story, somebody tell me a story. That's great. But like, something like this probably wouldn't work for me as an audiobook, whereas it very much is, as it, this is a bit reductive. It's like, wow, reading, but like, it's a little bit more like, I'll sit down and read a lengthy article online anytime. And that's all nonfiction, or mostly. And this has more of that feeling for me. It's like, oh, it just sort of, there's these connected for me recently. I was like, oh, the reason I don't like nonfiction is because I'm doing audiobooks and that isn't working for me. Okay, got it. And it's unlocked something new for me. So that's been cool.
Yeah, I really love, I've read, I don't think I finished SPQR because I read it too close to the library return deadline.
Oh, no.
So I'm like 75% through, and then I got back in line, and but I've read her Emperor books and a lot of other works from her. And my favorite thing is that she, a lot of people who cover Roman history are citing other Roman historians, and she cites a lot of like, this was on a wall.
Yeah.
This was a stone we found in the, like, she's constantly citing physical objects in the world that aren't the normal sources. My favorite thing, I read her Emperor's book, Emperor of Rome book recently, and she said the number one thing she'd do if she had a time machine to go to Rome is walk upstairs, because we have no second stories of any buildings. And we have no idea what happened on the second floor of anything. And because none of, like, almost the second floor internally didn't exist. So she's like, I just don't know what's upstairs. That's all I want to do. And that, the mind of a woman who is a historian and isn't like, no, I want to talk to this person. She's like, I just want to go upstairs because I don't have my physical evidence, has made her a much more interesting historian than people who are like so great men focused. I like her populist and physical evidence views quite a bit.
I've got a couple of other books queued up. I'm finding myself very interested in the sort of like, the history of Rome that isn't necessarily focused on, leaders and warriors, and is instead talking about like the everyday life of regular Romans. And there's just not that much of that, but we have a surprising amount of evidence about certain.
Even her things. Emperor's book is topic. It's like, what collectively did emperors do this way? Like, what is true about emperors in general, and what are the stories people told about emperors telling about the Roman populace? So even when she's trying to write kind of a biography book, she can't. And it's, I like that.
Well, it's good to hear that there are other good books from her that I could read if I finish this one. And I think I'm probably going to finish and enjoy it. Like I said, I think I'm probably only about halfway through, but I'm going to the beach tomorrow. And so this is on my Kindle, and I'm going to try to finish it while I'm at the beach. I love
that. I love you reading about ancient Rome on a beach.
I mean, I do a lot more reading at beaches. It's a great, I mean, it's a cliche. Everyone does beach reads, but like that's, I'm an audiobook person most of the time because that's what I have time for. But like at the beach, that's when you get the Kindle out or whatever. So. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. You can find our show on the internet at shortgame.fm, which is the website that has all the links. So it's a quick little one-pager. You can find links to our show on all the different platforms. Have you left a review for us lately? If you haven't, we would love it if you would. The show really, reviews on all the various platforms, including Apple Podcasts, really help get the show in front of new eyeballs. It gets, helps it surface in search results and so on. Also, you can find our Patreon there. The show is supported by our patrons on Patreon. We really appreciate our patrons. But more than that, our patrons are the community that this show is built around. And so if you are a patron of this show, then you get access to our Discord, which is where we talk about the games and kind of plan episodes. If you're interested in the kinds of games that we play and you want to hear about more of them and you want to hear what other people other than just me and Laura and a couple of other guys think about them, it's a great place to hang out on the internet. And it's also been a great place for talking about Animal Well, because that is our probably, we keep bumping it around in the schedule because it's a meaty game for what we cover, but we're probably covering that next. So I'm excited to talk about that soon. We have a channel there. So if you're needing hints or tips about Animal Well, everyone on our Discord is really good about spoiler tags. So join in. You can find me on various social medias. They're also linked from shortgame.fm. So I'm Raygan Kelly.
And I'm Laura Nash.
And thanks once again for joining us on this episode of The Short Game.